Welcome back. In this section, we're going to talk of this foundation of leadership. Why? Pastors, to engage teams, you need to know what your role and responsibility is. To delegate, you have to know what you're responsible for and what others can do. Henry Blackaby, in his book Spiritual Leadership, defined a spiritual leader as somebody moving people onto God's agenda. What a great definition. Let's look at the scriptural basis, pastors, for your role. In Acts 6, 1 through 6, and 2 Timothy 4, 1 and 2, pastors, you are admonished, you are told through Scripture that your role is as prayer, preacher, and teacher. That those are the tasks that God has called you to your church. No one else has the responsibility for those three. Others can help you, but you are responsible for praying, preaching, and teaching. Pastors, you're going to have 3 or 4 maybe of the spiritual gifts. There are 16 gifts that are all needed for your church. So you need to know which tasks are important and which tasks need to be passed to others so that they can use their spiritual gifts in fulfilling those tasks. Let's look at the apostles in Acts 6. What was really important about that was their assessment of this call to serve the Hellenistic Jewish widows. It was a good call. But was it the best for their talents? No, because their real call was to pray, preach, and teach. So this was a task that was good, but it wasn't the best for them to do. So they had the ability to say no, understanding what they needed to do. They were able to say no, and yet they were good leaders, and they found godly men to create a team of deacons to provide that service. Let me point out a little story that might help in terms of leadership. It's something that happened in the United States. A group of people hanging around together. And one person says, where do you want to go to lunch? And all the rest say, I don't know, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? And somebody eventually says, let's go to McDonald's. And the whole group says, okay, let's go to McDonald's. Well, let's talk about that. Who was the leader in the group? The one that said, let's go to McDonald's. Why? Because he made a decision and set a direction that others could follow. It's a simple story, but it makes the point. It's really a leader sets the direction. Now, in churches, Pastor, God has given you the Great Commission. Matthew 28, 19 through 20, and Acts 1, 8. And it's stated that you are to go into the world, into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the outermost parts, and take the word and make disciples of men. Now, that's a good task. You may need to restate it because you're not in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. So you do need to restate it specifically for your church. But God gave you that as your mission. Now, the vision for your church is something that pastors, you're called to work with God to understand. Let's use the example that Nehemiah gives in Nehemiah 2, 11 through 20. We know God gave him the mission of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. But he had to have a vision for what that was going to look like. Because a vision is like a snapshot, a photo of what the future will look like. So he needed to ride the walls of Jerusalem to set this vision. But let's look, if you look in those passages, you'll notice a couple of things. One, he rode alone. Why did he ride alone? So that he and God could work out what that vision was. 2, he did not bring along a committee. to understand that vision. He did it himself. So if you pastors will set that vision, will understand the direction, because once you set that vision and describe it to your congregation, you create an opportunity for them to use their imagination and their passion for how do we achieve this vision. And that's where you bring them in teams. Again, pastors, Nehemiah didn't bring a committee. He finished the vision, understood it, and then he went to the teams for each section of the wall and had them put together the strategy to complete the work on those sections of the wall. Pastors, you must be the one that sets God's vision. When you bring secular leaders into the church, they come looking for a vision because that's the way they know what it is that needs to be achieved. If they don't see a vision, they're going to have two responses. One, they'll make one, or they'll leave. In observing church splits, I think you would find that most church splits occur on a disagreement over what the vision is. The pastor was not clear, and two people stood up and came up with two different visions for the church, and the church splits. But pastors, if you will understand God's call on you to define that vision, just as he called Nehemiah, I think that'll give you great strength and give your church a very powerful tool in what to achieve and what to work on as we build these teams. Thanks. See you next time.